The first time I saw him cry, I laughed. Not because it was funny, God, no, but because it felt impossible. Ethan Monroe didn't cry. Not in the 3 months we'd shared that shitty apartment in Brooklyn. Not even when he burned his hand on the stove or got fired from his bar job. But that night, with rain tapping against the window and our lights flickering out, he sat on the floor and let it all fall apart. And I didn't know what to do except laugh quietly, nervously, because my brain couldn't process the fact that the strongest man I knew was shattering right in front of me. Sorry, he said hoarsely, swiping his face with his sleeve. Guess I'm not really the tough guy you thought I was. I didn't know then that this was the beginning of everything, of the truth, the lies, and the love I never meant to find. Ethan moved in with me because New York is cruel to dreamers. We were both 22, both broke, both running from something. I was trying to get through my senior year at NYU without completely losing my mind. He was, well, I didn't know what he was trying to do. He said he was between things, which could have meant anything from changing jobs to hiding from the law. He had that kind of mystery about him, the kind that pulls you in but keeps you guessing. Tattoos half hidden under his sleeves, a voice that was low and steady, eyes that said too much and nothing at all. At first, he was just my roommate, a quiet guy who never brought anyone over, who spent nights sketching in his notebook and mornings staring at the skyline like it owed him an answer. Then one night, he came home bleeding. Jesus, Ethan. I nearly dropped my ramen when I saw the cut across his lip and the bruises blooming along his jaw. It's nothing, he muttered, heading straight for the sink. Just a misunderstanding. With who? A truck? He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. When I offered to help clean him up, he didn't stop me. He sat on the counter, silent, as I dabbed alcohol on his cheek. The touch was electric, ridiculous, I know. But there was something about him, something raw and untamed. I wanted to ask, who did this? And why won't you let anyone in? But the words died in my throat. Instead, I said, you should tell me if you're in trouble. He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, I already am. That was Ethan. A walking contradiction. Strong yet fragile. Kind yet distant. The kind of person who made you want to know more, even when it hurt. And God, did it hurt? The lies started small. He said he worked nights at a warehouse. He said the phone calls he took on the fire escape were from his sister. He said he didn't drink much. All of it, Lise. I found out piece by piece, like shards of glass hidden in my own bed. One night, I came home early from a study group. The apartment was dark, except for the faint glow of Ethan's laptop. He didn't hear me at first. He was too busy typing furiously, his face lit by the blue light. Then he looked up and I saw it. The logo. The fucking logo. A news outlet. Underground journalism. Leaking files. Ethan. He froze, then shut the laptop with a sharp snap. You shouldn't be home. What is this? Are you? It's not what you think, he said quickly. I'm not doing anything illegal. Really? Because it looks like you're exposing people who kill for a living. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. You're right. I don't. Because you never tell me anything. He stood, anger flashing through his voice. You wouldn't believe me if I did. Try me. He hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to see the fear in his eyes. The kind that doesn't come from guilt, but from knowing you can't protect the people you love. Then he said it. Quietly. I'm trying to make things right. After that, something changed between us. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to kick him out, report him, whatever the right thing was supposed to be. But every time I saw him bandaging his knuckles, staring out the window, half smiling when I made coffee too strong, I couldn't do it. I'd fallen for him. Somewhere between the lies and the late-night talks, I'd fallen. And the worst part? I think he knew. It was the little things. The way he'd leave a mug of tea on my desk when I pulled all-nighters. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way his hand would brush mine, accidentally on purpose, when we reached for the same door. But we never said it. We couldn't. Because loving Ethan Monroe meant walking into the fire with him, and I wasn't sure I was brave enough for that. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke to the sound of shouting. A voice deep, angry echoing through the hallway outside our door. "Ethan, open the damn door." My heart dropped. I ran to the living room just as Ethan grabbed his jacket, his face pale. "Who is that?" I whispered. He didn't answer, just looked at me with that same haunted expression. "I need you to trust me, okay?" Before I could reply, the door burst open. Two men. Big, broad, with the kind of look that says trouble's here. Ethan pushed me back. "Stay behind me." "What the hell is going on?" The taller man sneered. "So this is where you've been hiding, huh? Cute place." His eyes flicked to me. "Cute roommate." I felt my stomach twist. "Leave him out of this," Ethan snapped. "Can't do that," the man said. "You stole from us, Monroe. You think we'd just forget." And that's when I realized the lies weren't just about his job. They were about survival. The fight was chaos. Furniture crashing, glass breaking, the sound of fists against walls. Ethan fought like a man who'd done it before. I grabbed the phone, called 911, but by the time the sirens echoed down the street, the men were gone and Ethan was bleeding again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, pressing a towel to his arm. He looked at me, eyes filled with exhaustion and something like regret. "Because I didn't want you to see this part of me." "Too late," I said, tears burning my eyes. "I already do." He smiled weakly. "Then I guess you know the truth." That night, I stayed by his side until the ambulance came. And as the city lights flickered through the window, I realized something I'd been denying for months. I didn't just care about him. I loved him. Not the version he pretended to bait a real one. The broken, chaotic, brave man sitting beside me. The hospital smelled like bleach and broken promises. I sat in the waiting room, hands trembling, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Ethan was somewhere behind those doors, being stitched back together while I tried not to fall apart. I told the cops everything I knew well, almost everything. They asked who the men were, what they wanted, if Ethan had been involved in something illegal. I said I didn't know, because the truth was I didn't, and that scared me more than anything. When they finally let me see him, it was past 3 a.m. He was lying on a narrow bed, hooked to an 4, his knuckles bandaged, his face pale but peaceful. For once, he looked like he was sleeping, really sleeping. I pulled up a chair beside him and just stared. At the bruises, at the lines on his forehead, at the man I thought I knew. "Who are you, Ethan?" I whispered. His hand twitched, like he'd heard me. The next morning, he woke to the sound of my phone buzzing against the tray table. He blinked, confused, and tried to sit up. "Easy," I said, standing quickly. "You lost a lot of blood." He smiled faintly. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," I said before I could stop myself. Something flickered in his eyes, something soft and painful at the same time. "You shouldn't have." "Too bad," I shot back. "I'm bad at doing what I should." He laughed quietly, then winced. "God, that hurts." "Then maybe stop getting into fights with mystery men in the middle of the night." "Yeah," he murmured, gaze drifting to the window. "Maybe I should." There was a long pause. The kind that hums with all the things you're too afraid to say. Finally, I asked, "Who were they?" He didn't look at me. "People I used to work for." "Doing what?" He hesitated, then said softly, "Finding things that weren't supposed to be found." I frowned. "You mean journalism?" He nodded. "Kind of, but darker, more dangerous. Think, whistleblower meets blackmail." I stared at him. "You were blackmailing people?" He looked at me then, his eyes hollow. "No, I was trying to expose them. But when you threaten people with power, they find a way to bury you." Something twisted in my chest. "So that's why you lied to me." "I didn't want you involved." "I already am." His jaw tightened. "That's exactly what I was trying to prevent." We didn't talk much after that. The doctors discharged him the next day with a prescription and a warning, and we took a cab back to the apartment in silence. Felt different now, our space. The walls seemed smaller, the air heavier. There were still cracks in the drywall from the fight, shards of glass glinting on the floor like memories we couldn't clean up. He went straight to his room, closed the door, and I just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the dent in the wall where one of the men's fists had hit. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream at him for dragging me into his mess. But more than that, I wanted to go into his room and hold him. So I did. It was late after midnight. The city outside was a blur of sirens and headlights. I pushed his door open quietly, half expecting him to be asleep. He wasn't. He was sitting on the floor again, back against the wall, staring at a sketchbook open on his knees. He didn't look up. Can't sleep either? I shook my head and sat beside him. You're drawing. He nodded. Trying to. I glanced down and froze. It was me, sitting by the window reading. The light soft against my face. You draw me. He shrugged, embarrassed. You sit still a lot. That's the worst excuse I've ever heard. He smiled barely. Yeah, well, it's the truth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the city outside, the heartbeat of a world that didn't care we were breaking apart. Then he said quietly, You shouldn't have seen that laptop. I'm glad I did. He looked at me, eyes sharp. Why? Because now I know you're not just some mysterious asshole with bad cooking skills. He laughed. Wow, that's romantic. I leaned in a little. You risk your life for something you believe in. That's brave. He stared at me, his breath catching. You don't get it, Eli. I've done things, I don't care. He blinked, startled. You should. Maybe. But I don't. And before I could lose the courage, I reached out and touched his hand. Just lightly. Enough to let him pull away if he wanted. He didn't. We sat there for what felt like forever, the space between us shrinking until I could feel his breath against my skin. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with that quiet intensity that always made me feel like I was standing too close to the sun. Then he said, so softly I almost didn't hear it, You don't know how dangerous this is. I don't care, I whispered. He leaned forward, hesitated, then kissed me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even gentle. It was desperate and messy and real. Every fear, every lie, every unspoken word between us ignited in that single touch. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, staring like we couldn't believe what we'd just done. Ethan, he shook his head. We shouldn't. But we did. And for once, he didn't argue. The days that followed blurred together. We didn't talk about what happened, but everything had changed. The way he looked at me, the way I noticed every damn thing about him, the way he sipped his coffee, the way his shoulders tensed when he thought too hard, the way he smiled like it cost him something. But the world outside didn't stop. Neither did the calls. Late at night, I'd wake to the sound of his phone buzzing. Sometimes he'd leave. Sometimes he'd whisper quietly in the kitchen. I didn't ask. Not yet. Until one night I woke up and he was gone. The apartment was dark, his bed empty, his jacket missing. Panic shot through me like a wire. I grabbed my phone, called him once, twice, no answer. Then a text came through. You don't look for me. Please. It's safer this way. I stared at the screen, heart breaking. Me, Ethan, don't do this. Where are you? No reply. For 3 days, nothing. No calls. No messages. No sign of him. I went to work, to class, tried to pretend like everything was normal, but my mind kept replaying that kiss, that look in his eyes, that goodbye disguised as silence. Then on the 4th night, there was a knock at the door. He looked like hell. His hoodie was torn, his hands scraped, his eyes wild with exhaustion. Before I could even say anything, he said, Pack a bag. We have to go. What? They found out about you. My stomach dropped. Who? The people I exposed. They know you're connected to me. You're not safe here. I didn't argue. Something in his voice told me this wasn't paranoia. Within minutes, I was shoving clothes into a backpack while he kept watch by the window. My hands were shaking too hard to zip it. Ethan, I whispered. What did you do? He turned to me, his expression breaking. The right thing. I just didn't think it'd cost you. We left before dawn. The city looked different in the early hours, quiet, hollow, as if holding its breath. We drove for hours, crossing state lines, neither of us saying much. Finally, we stopped at a small motel off the highway. The sign flickered weakly, half the bulbs burned out. Inside, the room was small, one bed, peeling wallpaper, the smell of cheap disinfectant. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his hands buried in his hair. "I didn't mean for this to touch you, Eli. I swear." "I know," I said softly. He looked up at me, eyes glistening. "I've lost everything before. I can't lose you too." "You won't." He shook his head. "You don't get it. People like me, we don't get happy endings." I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. "Then maybe we write our own." He looked at me like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You still trust me after everything?" "No," I said honestly. "But I believe you." There's a difference, and he knew it. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed his fingers against my cheek. "You should have run the moment I knocked on your door. Maybe I was waiting for trouble." He smiled, that tired, beautiful smile that always broke me a little. "Then congratulations. You found it." We both laughed, softly, like people who'd forgotten how. Outside, rain started to fall, tapping against the window like a quiet reminder that the world was still turning. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether we'd survive it, whether we'd even make it back to New York, but for that one night, I didn't care, because he was there, and I was done pretending I didn't love him. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It came down in sheets, drumming against the motel roof like the world was trying to wash us away. Ethan barely slept. He kept his phone off, his bag packed, his eyes constantly flicking toward the window like he was waiting for ghosts. I wanted to believe we were safe. I wanted to believe love could outrun whatever was chasing him. But love isn't a shield. It's a spotlight. It exposes everything you try to hide. The morning of the 3rd day, he stood by the door, a shadow in the weak light. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. "They'll trace the car by now." I sat up, bleary-eyed. "Then what? Keep running forever? If that's what it takes." "No," I said firmly. "You can't live like this, Ethan. Neither of us can." He looked at me, jaw tight. "You think I want this? I think you're tired of running. I think you've been tired for a long time." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a moment I thought he might finally break. Then he said, almost to himself, "I used to believe the truth would set people free. Turns out, it just paints a target on your back." I stood, crossed the space between us, and put a hand on his chest. His heart was pounding fast, uneven. "Then stop carrying it alone." He stared down at me, his voice rough. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Yes, I do. And maybe I did. Or maybe I was just done being afraid." We left the motel before sunrise, taking back roads through upstate New York. The world outside was gray and endless trees bending in the wind, the road slick and silent. Ethan drove like a man who didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stop. Hours passed. Then, without warning, he pulled over by a lake. The water shimmered under the pale morning light, mist curling above its surface. He got out without a word, walked to the edge, and threw his phone into the water. I watched it sink, bubbles rising briefly before disappearing into the dark. "Ethan, it's over," he said quietly. "No more calls, no more running. If they find me, they find me." I stepped closer. "And me?" He turned to look at me, eyes heavy with regret. "You shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes." "Too late," I said softly. "I already did. I fell for you." He flinched, like the words hit him harder than a bullet. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind through the trees and the faint ripple of water against the shore. Then he said, "You want the truth? The whole thing?" I nodded. He took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the lake. "I wasn't just exposing corruption. I was part of it once. The group I worked for dug up dirt for politicians, corporations, whoever paid. I told myself it was journalism, but it was blackmail, plain and simple." My chest tightened. "I quit when I realized they were targeting people who couldn't fight back." "A teacher," A single mom. People who didn't deserve it. So I took what I had, proof, files, recordings, and leaked it. That's why they came after me. He turned to me, voice shaking. I thought I could fix what I broke. But all I did was make new enemies. I stared at him, 1,000 emotions fighting inside me. Anger, fear, admiration, love. Finally, I said, "You did the right thing." He laughed bitterly. "Right doesn't matter when you're dead." "Then don't die," I said. "Live. With me." He blinked, caught off guard. "Eli, I don't care where we go. I don't care what we have to do. Just don't leave me again." His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Then he said, almost like a prayer, "You have no idea how much I want to believe that." We found a small town that afternoon, a place called Waverly Falls, population barely 2,000. We rented a tiny cabin by the edge of the woods. No internet, no noise, just quiet. For a while it felt almost normal. We fixed the leaks in the roof, cooked terrible pasta, watched bad TV on an old antenna set. He started sketching again. Me mostly, sometimes the lake, sometimes both. One night, I woke up to find him standing outside, staring at the stars. His hair was damp from the mist, his shoulders trembling. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head. "I keep thinking about all the people I hurt, all the things I can't undo." I stepped up beside him. "Maybe you can't undo it, but you're still here. That means something." He looked at me, eyes shining in the moonlight. "You always think there's a way back, don't you?" "Yeah," I whispered. "Because I found mine." He smiled then, small but real, and pulled me close. That night we made love for the first time. It wasn't rushed or desperate, it was quiet, trembling, full of unspoken forgiveness. Every scar, every secret between us melted into something raw and human. When he kissed me, it felt like home. But peace never lasts forever. A week later, the past found us again. We were driving back from the grocery store when I noticed a black SUV in the rearview mirror. It had been behind us for 10 miles, maybe more. "Ethan," I said quietly. "Don't freak out, but I think I see it," he said, voice low. He took a sharp turn onto a dirt road. The SUV followed. My pulse spiked. "What do we do?" He didn't answer. He pressed harder on the gas. The tires kicked up gravel, trees flashing past in a blur. The SUV gained on us. Then bang. A gunshot. The rear window shattered, glass raining across the seats. "Get down," Ethan shouted. I ducked, heart in my throat. The car swerved violently, then skidded to a stop. Ethan jumped out before I could stop him. Gun in hand, where the hell had he gotten a gun? "Stay here," he yelled. "Like hell." I threw open my door and followed. The SUV screeched to a halt 20 feet away. Two men stepped out, one of them the same guy from our apartment that night. Well, the man sneered. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Ethan raised his weapon. "It ends here." "Funny," the man said, pulling his own gun. "That's what I was gonna say." The air was electric, thick with tension. I could barely breathe. Then the man's gun tilted toward me. Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved faster than I could think. One shot, then another. The first missed. The second didn't. The man dropped. The other fled into the woods. For a moment, there was silence, just the echo of the gunfire and the sound of rain beginning to fall again. Then Ethan turned toward me, his face pale. "Eli, I'm sorry." I frowned. "For what?" He stumbled, then I saw it. Blood blooming across his side. "Ethan." I ran to him, catching him as he fell. "It's okay," he whispered, voice weak. "It's just a scratch. Don't you dare lie to me again." He smiled faintly. "Old habits." I pressed my hand against the wound, tears blurring my vision. "You're gonna be okay. You hear me? You're gonna be fine." He reached up, brushed his fingers against my cheek. "You remember what you said? About writing our own ending?" "Yeah," I choked out. "Then write me one where you're free." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not without you." He tried to speak again, but his voice broke into a whisper. "I love you." And then his hand went still. The world went quiet. No rain. No wind. Just silence. I don't remember calling for help. I don't remember the sirens or the flashing lights or the questions. I just remember holding him, whispering his name over and over. Like if I said it enough times, he'd wake up. But he didn't. The police took my statement. They said Ethan's files had already been sent to federal investigators. His final act of defiance. Turns out he'd scheduled the upload before we ran. He knew this might happen. His story went public 2 days later. Headlines everywhere. The truth finally out. And somehow that made it worse. Because the world got justice. But I lost the only person who ever made it feel worth fighting for. Months passed. I moved back to the city. Finished school. Tried to live. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at rooftops at sunset, expecting to see him there leaning against the railing, smirking at the sky. He wasn't, of course. But sometimes, if the light hit just right, I could almost believe he was. I kept one of his sketches, the one of me by the window, the pencil lines faint, the edges smudged, his signature barely visible in the corner. I hung it by the bed, and every morning, I'd look at it and whisper, "You got your ending, Ethan." But so did I, because even though he was gone, the love he left behind didn't die with him. Stayed wild, imperfect, and real. A year later, I visited the lake again. The same place where he threw his phone, where he finally told me the truth. The water was calm, sunlight dancing across its surface. I took a deep breath and said quietly, "You once told me people like you don't get happy endings. But maybe that's the thing, Ethan. Maybe love is the happy ending." I dropped a single lily into the lake and watched it drift away. Then I smiled, because for the first time in a long time, the ache in my chest felt a little less sharp. Maybe that's what healing isn't, forgetting, but remembering without breaking. And as I turned to leave, I could almost hear his voice on the windsoft, teasing, "Alive. Guess you finally stopped laughing at me, huh?" "Not a chance," I whispered, smiling through tears. "Not ever." Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.